Okay, so get ready for a deep dive today. We're tackling a big one, Jesus and Krishna. Yeah, you guys asked for it. A deep dive into their differences, and maybe some unexpected common ground. We're going deep with Jesus versus Krishna inside the minds of gods. But just so you know, this isn't your typical religious debate. We're not looking for a winner, are we?
No, not at all.
We're digging into their totally different approaches to love, salvation, and even what it means to be divine.
Yeah, and what I find so fascinating about this book is that it imagines this like actual conversation between them.
A bit interesting.
Not a debate where they're trying to one-up each other, but a genuine back and forth. It's like we get to eavesdrop on how they might have thought and felt.
Right, like instead of just reading their greatest hits, we're backstage with them. A behind-the-scenes look. Okay, so before we go any further, can you give us a quick refresher on the core ideas we think we know about Jesus and Krishna, just to set the stage?
Absolutely. So Jesus, right, when you think about him, you think sacrifice, like taking on all the world's suffering to offer redemption.
Right.
The embodiment of selfless love and enduring hardship, for the greater good.
Yeah.
And then you have Krishna, who embodies a more joyous kind of approach, right?
Yeah.
He's all about finding that divine spark in everything, even in the rough times.
Yeah, two very different vibes.
Exactly. And that's where this book gets really interesting. It takes these seemingly opposite approaches and says, hold on, what if they're just two sides of the same coin?
Oh, I like that.
Two paths, same destination.
Okay, so we've got Jesus, Mr. Selfless Sacrifice, and Krishna, all about that cosmic joy. How does the book bring those two seemingly opposite ideas together?
Well, it uses this really cool metaphor of a coin.
Okay.
Two sides, but same value, right?
Yeah.
So with Jesus, you've got that radical empathy, taking on humanity's suffering, right? Offering himself as that bridge between us and the divine.
And then on the other side, you have Krishna encouraging us to connect with the divine through understanding and detachment.
Yeah.
Not escaping suffering, but like understanding its place in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. Embracing Lila, right? That cosmic play.
Right.
Finding that divine dance even in the hardship. Realizing we're part of something so much bigger and our struggles are just like one tiny, tiny act in that whole grand play.
I see what you mean about them seeming like total opposites on the surface, but when you dig a little deeper, they share that same goal. Guiding humanity towards something bigger.
Totally, like two sides of the same mountain, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
One path might be super tough, right? Tons of sacrifice. But the other one, it's all about finding the joy in the journey.
Right.
But ultimately, they both get you to that same profound connection with something beyond just us.
Yeah. What I really like is how this book doesn't just talk about what they taught, but actually tries to get inside their heads. Like, what was Jesus really feeling in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? It really captures that moment of doubt, of struggle, which we don't often think about with Jesus.
Totally. I mean, it makes him so much more human, Like, here he is facing this unimaginable thing, knowing what's coming, and he's dealing with fear and doubt just like any of us would. It's a good reminder that we're not alone, even in those super tough times.
And it's funny you mention that because the book also digs into Krishna and how he guides Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, which is basically, a masterclass in dealing with tough situations. How does that story show us his approach in action?
Well, Arjuna's dilemma on the battlefield, that story is pure Krishna's philosophy, right?
Yeah.
He's teaching Arjuna to act from duty, but not be attached to the outcome. It's about knowing we all have a part to play, in this cosmic dance.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't get hung up on succeeding or failing.
Yeah.
It's that balance, action and acceptance, even when everything seems totally overwhelming.
So we're talking about two very different approaches to life and spirituality, but they both have so much to teach us about dealing with our own struggles today.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll unpack next. Like, how can we actually use these ancient teachings in our modern lives, How can understanding Jesus' sacrifice and Krishna's Lila help us find meaning and purpose in this world that, frankly, feels pretty chaotic sometimes?
So we've gone deep into Jesus and Krishna, their contrasting philosophies, but how about we bring it back down to earth for a second? How do we actually use these ancient ideas in our modern lives? What wisdom can we take from these guys who lived thousands of years ago?
Well, that's the thing about these teachings. They're timeless, right? They still resonate today.
Yeah.
Like, take Krishna's concept of Lila, for example.
Oh, okay.
That's not just some abstract spiritual idea. It's actually a practical tool for navigating the ups and downs of, just everyday life.
Okay, so how do we actually use Lila then? Does that mean like smiling through every traffic jam and pretending it's part of some big divine plan?
Not quite. It's more about like shifting your perspective a little.
Okay.
What if you approached that frustrating commute not as a chore, but as a tiny act in Krishna's Lila?
Okay.
Would it change your experience? Maybe you start to notice things you wouldn't have before, the way the light hits the buildings.
Right.
Maybe you strike up a conversation with the barista you always see but never talk to.
Right, right.
It doesn't magically erase the difficulty, but it can bring in a sense of wonder, even purpose, to those moments that would otherwise just be totally mundane.
Yeah, I like that. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, even when it's tough. But what about Jesus then? His whole message of self-sacrifice in today's world where it seems like everything's about self-care, personal fulfillment, it feels like that idea could get a little lost.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're constantly told to prioritize ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But this book really highlights how true fulfillment often comes from something bigger than just us.
Okay.
It's not about becoming a martyr or ignoring your own needs,
Right.
but about recognizing that deep joy, lasting joy, often comes from giving, connecting, looking beyond ourselves.
Yeah, finding that balance, self-care, selflessness. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
But this conversation, it really highlights how powerful it can be to think about both those things at the same time. Jesus's radical empathy, Krishna's detached action.
It's in that tension, that space between what seems like opposite ideas, right?
Yeah.
That's where we often find these really deep truths.
Mm.
And ultimately, I think both paths, they lead us back to the same fundamental value.
And what's that? Love.
Yeah, it always seems to come back to that, whether it's the love of a savior, the love of a divine teacher, even just the love we have for ourselves, the love we try to show others.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole exploration so relevant, I think. It's not about picking a side. It's
Yeah.
about asking yourself, what does love look like in my life? How can I, live that out more fully, more authentically?
Such a good question.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how this book ends. It doesn't really have a definitive answer. It just kind of leaves you with this space to think.
Right. It's like it's inviting you to keep thinking about it. Find your own answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's an invitation to keep exploring those big questions, have those conversations in your own head, and ultimately just find your own unique path to love, to meaning, to connection.
Absolutely.
Well, it's amazing how these figures from thousands of years ago can still get us thinking in such a deep way. We've covered a lot of ground, from enlightenment to everyday struggles, and through it all, one thing's for sure. The search for meaning, connection, and love, it's universal. And whether you find yourself connecting more with Jesus's empathy or Krishna's Leela, the important thing is to keep searching, keep exploring those big questions. Until next time, keep diving deep.